Zaf, thank you so much for giving Josh and I your time this morning. Appreciate that you'll be extremely busy at the moment. If you wouldn't mind, it'd be great if you could just quickly introduce yourself and the role you undertake. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks for inviting me. So my name's Dr. Zafar Iqbal. I'm a consultant in sports and exercise medicine. Currently the head of sports medicine at Crystal Palace Football Club, and I've held previously similar roles at Liverpool and Tottenham Hotspurs as well. So my main aim as the head of the medical team is, with the rest of the department, is to try and improve the health and the performance of the players, and literally to provide as many players in as best condition as possible for the manager so that they can best perform.
Brilliant. And over the course of the past month, there's been some focus around Ramadan and its relationship with the game. Firstly, could I just ask you, what is Ramadan?
So Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, and it's a very important month for Muslims because it was a time that the Holy Quran was first revealed, but it's also a time for reflection, sacrifice, charity, and community. It's fasting is one of the 5 main pillars of Islam. So the others are believing in God, prayer, fasting, charity, and if possible, going on pilgrimage to Mecca. So Ramadan itself, as we said, it's fasting. What that actually means is that between the hours from dawn right through to sunset, all Muslims abstain from food, fluid, and personal relationships. And when I say all Muslims, it's those that are healthy. So the young under the age of 14 are not obliged to do it. Similarly with the elderly and those that are unwell. Main purpose behind it is to try and be grateful and appreciative for all that we've got. It's a time of thinking not only for yourself, but also for the community and for those that are less fortunate than yourself. And a large part is also to do with charity as well. So at the end of the month, we give 2.5% of what we have to charity, which is really important.
That's amazing. And are there any particular? How do you go about choosing the charities that you donate to? Is that a matter of personal choice? I'm guessing that Crystal Palace themselves have a particular choice in that regard.
So it's completely down to the individual. So any Muslim, it's entirely up to them who they decide that they want to give the charity to.
Brilliant. And of course, there's a sizable and growing Muslim contingent of footballers within the Premier League and the wider Football League for that matter. What are the sort of main implications for Muslim footballers during the week, and particularly on game day?
So look, we know that football is a very intensive sport and requires the right nutrition and hydration to be able to perform at the highest level. So for a player that is fasting while training and playing games, then some may say that this might put them at a disadvantage in terms of for them to be able to recover or them to be able to perform at the highest level. But to be honest, when you actually speak to players, there are other factors which they feel that benefit them. And really the mental aspect is something that is really important to them. So the fact that they're fasting, they feel that it gives them additional mental strength. So I recently organized a conference on fasting and sport. And so we had some prominent Muslim athletes such as Sonny Bill Williams, Moeen Ali, Freddie Kanute, and Azhar Ali. And all of them, the recurring theme was that fasting really helped them spiritually and mentally focus even more. So it made them even more disciplined. And we all know in whatever line of work that you do, how powerful the mind is. So that if you really put your mind to something, you have the right attitude, then whatever work that you do is going to be far more productive.
So it's really interesting you say that, Zach, because I suppose I would have naturally just thought of the mental as well as the physical disadvantages of fasting during a game. But you point to so many positive aspects of fasting there, which I wouldn't have necessarily given much regard to. That's really interesting to hear.
No, I agree. And as I say, sometimes myself, when I have been fasting, I'm thinking I'm finding this quite difficult. My clarity of thought may not, often be a little bit dulled. But to be honest, what happens? I'm able to cope. I mean, when I was working in the in the hospital, even though I wasn't fasting during Ramadan. Sorry, I wasn't actually fasting. Um, we'd have long hours. You wouldn't grab anything to eat or drink, and you just continue and be able to do the work regardless. So there would be many times where you wouldn't have any food or fluid, and you just be able to get on with the work because you had a task in hand. The time I struggle most is probably when I'm resting, and I'm not having to think about work. And that's when I start really thinking about food or fluid. But otherwise, if I've got a task in hand, then I'm usually be able to focus on that. And it's interesting, when I spoke to Sonny Bill Williams, he said that some of the best games he's had is while he's been fasting. And this, we're talking about a rugby player playing at an elite level for 80 minutes, and we all know how physical rugby is.
So fascinating, and I suppose we've been in the midst, we still are in the midst, of course, of a huge global pandemic, which we know has affected all manner of all different walks of life, and has really truly had an impact on the game that we know and love. So, what have been the sort of the main impacts on Ramadan with regard to the pandemic?
So I think the key one there is that normally with Ramadan, it's also a time for community as well. So you try and spend as much time with your friends and family, and of course that has been difficult. So normally at the when you have your evening meal, you're sharing that with other people. You're going out into the community, trying to provide for food for other people who are less fortunate than yourself. And again, that's been made a little bit more difficult. Going to the mosque again, to increase that community spirit. Again, that all has been made that a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and we of course observed the break in the game last week, which you were wonderfully modest about at the time. So I shared a LinkedIn post last week, which was viewed quite a lot regarding how that particular break in proceedings had never been seen before in the Premier League, and thank you so much for providing your own response to that. And it'd be good just to walk us through how did that come about?
So thanks for highlighting regarding the Iftar break. But as I say, it came about because I spoke with Brian English before the game, as we often do, just to make sure all the emergency procedures are in place. And I knew that they had some Muslim players, and we also had some Muslim players. So I asked him whether it would be a good idea to ask the referee and the managers if we could have a break, and so they could open the fast. So he asked his manager, I asked my manager. They didn't see an issue. We then went to Mr. Scott, the referee, and both of us together, and said, look, we've got some players that are fasting. Is it okay if we have a small break, literally 30, 40 seconds, so they can have a quick drink and a date just to open their fast? Again, he was very understanding, didn't see a problem with it. And we told the players, and then when it came to the actual time, there was actually 2 times where the referee had blown up, and he'd signaled for the players to go over, but at that time the players didn't fully realize. So there's myself and the Leicester medical team trying to get the attention of our players, but they just didn't understand. So it was about 5 minutes after they were meant to have opened their fast that there was another pause in play, and they came over and opened their fast. And again, my whole purpose was to try and keep it low key so that people could realize that actually it wasn't anything that was unusual. It didn't interrupt the flow of the game. And also because I understand there's always going to be some people who are going to try and object to it and say, well, why is this happening? Why are only certain groups of people being allowed to do this? And that for me wasn't the case. If we look at during summer last year, we had lots of games close together. We had drinks breaks then. So for me, this is about player welfare. And I know at the end of the game, it was very much appreciated by players from both sides. And I think that's where Wesley tweeted it. And I think it just blew up from there, really.
Is that you mentioned you had some negative feedback you're always going to in the football world, no matter what happens? Is that mainly from some within the kind of footballing circle? Is that from like the fans?
I think it's just a mixture, to be honest. There's going to be people who, I think, probably because of the fact that they saw this, well, actually, is this only affecting Muslim players? Why is this particular group having certain exceptions made for them? What are they going to be asking for next? And for me, it was just a case of, as I say, player welfare. We're just talking about a player who's fasted all day, and just having a little bit of understanding, respect for them, and enabling them to have some fluid and some food on board to open their fast. So again, I didn't see it as a big issue, and it's been mainly positive. And as I said, when I saw the message on LinkedIn, I was pleasantly surprised by the very positive comments that were put on there.
Do you think, have you been approached by anybody else since then about perhaps making this a permanent thing going forward during every Ramadan, or do you think it's going to have a snowball effect?
So I think it probably is going to have a snowball effect, and I sent a message to the head of the referees, Mike Riley. Also wanted to pass on my thanks to Mr. Scott, the referee at the time, Graham Scott at the time. And from what I hear now, that it's, the referees are going to ask both captains if they want a break. And you've got to remember, it's not every game. It's going to be those games which are evening games, because Iftar is the fast is opened during at sunset. So it's not every game. It's going to be only a few games. But again, it's just nice, just as a gesture, as a sign of respect, really. And I know it's greatly appreciated by those players that it involves. And to be honest, as I say, if you looked at everyone in the stadium, we're talking about the players from both sides, the managers, the coaching staff, the journalists. Nobody had any issues with it. The time that it took was less than a minute, and we know these days there are other interruptions in games which take far longer than that.
Yeah, you put so diplomatically there. I'm sure we probably know that we're talking about the VAR, and it's
as well as other things.
Yeah, well, Josh is a Charlton fan, so fortunately he doesn't have to deal with the trials and tribulations week in, week out. I don't know whether that was a veiled insult, but there we go. But clearly, clearly footballers have observed, Ramadan during football games in the past. Yeah, why, after 25 and the rest sort of years of Premier League football, why is this the first time that this happened? I mean, surely the question has been asked before.
It's a good question. I think probably because of the fact that certain players may have felt that there may be negativity surrounding it, that it may be a request which may not be given. Some players may have felt that their faith may be held against them. I think there had been in the past some negative comments that those players that are fasting, they're not able to perform at the highest level, so they may get criticism from fans or even managers or coaching staff. But I think there's over the years there's been a lot more understanding. I recently, as I said, I recently organized a conference, and we had one of the leading scientists and researchers in the world on fasting and sport, Prof. Karim Shamiri, and who's based out in Qatar. So he spoke about in terms of what the evidence behind it is. But again, if you speak to the players, the main thing that they find is that they get a lot of additional benefits, and certainly the mental strength that they gain from fasting overcomes any possible negative consequences of not having enough food and fluid. So I think it's just the fact there's more recognition, there's more acceptance and more tolerance, really, and people are accepting, look, there are a lot more Muslim players, they're going to be fasting regardless, so why not help support them?
So is there any evidence of them being perhaps a little bit more injury prone during Ramadan?
So The evidence that is actually shown, it's a little bit more difficult because the research that has been done has mainly been done on athletes from Muslim countries. And the reason why you can't directly relate that to Premier League is because when they train and play is usually at different times. So in Muslim countries, they will change the training and games so that it's done after they've opened their fast. So you can't directly relate to that. But I think anecdotally, when you look at information that is out there, it doesn't appear to be the case that there is an increase in injuries, although physiologically you'd think that is the case if somebody is dehydrated or they've not got enough nutrition on board, that they may not be able to perform as well, or they may be at higher risk of injury. But there's not evidence to suggest that is indeed the case.
Just coming back onto the reaction of what happened last Monday, just again for a second. I mean, Josh and I have we have the position to be able to see what the reaction is from a social media point of view. Just from inside the club and also with regard to I can see on the Crystal Palace website, for example, the various charters in terms of the club's ethos and what they expect not just of their employees but also the fans when they attend games. Is this very much a starting point? Are there any other particular kind of diversity and inclusion orientated initiatives that the club are currently undertaking or looking to undertake in the near future?
To be honest, Crystal Palace and all the clubs that I've worked at have been fantastic in terms of making the club as inclusive as possible. And any type of bigotry, any type of hatred just will not be tolerated. And it just seems it's bizarre. So from the outside, I hear lots with regards to racism and bigotry, but having worked within the departments that I have done, I can honestly say that anybody who shows any sign of intolerance towards somebody else, based on their gender, faith, background, it just wouldn't be tolerated. Crystal Palace, now the current club that I'm working at, they are very keen to, portray that we're very much an inclusive club. But as I said, go back to even when I was at Tottenham, I could give you many examples. Some of my best memories are not just where I've been fortunate to have won things, but it's the little things. So if I could just give a quick example, when I was at Tottenham Hotspur, we were playing up in Newcastle, and we just have a team meeting. The manager's giving his team talk, and there's a knock on the door, and a security guard brings in a huge platter of food. And he goes, "This is for the doctor." And he goes right across the dressing room, right across the manager, and hands it to me. And I had no idea about it. And it was actually Jonathan Woodgate, because he'd also played at Newcastle, knew that was fasting, and without even me asking, had organised for a plate of food to be brought. But this was a huge platter. I mean, I think the whole team could have eaten from that platter. But it was just the fact that, it'd been organised, and it's quite a funny moment. But everyone just laughed about it. But for me, that just made me feel part of the team. And another example was when I was at Liverpool, where we just won the League Cup, and we're heading back to the dressing rooms, and the goalkeeper Pepe Reina and Glenn Johnson stopped me and said, "Look, we're going to be spraying champagne in there. It's probably not a good idea you're going in there." And someone even had the foresight to actually take my clothes out of there. So here's their big moment. But even within their big moment, they had the decency to think about myself. And I'd not asked about it, but they knew, and they know that I don't like being around alcohol. That's my choice. But at the same time, it's not a problem for them. It doesn't influence how they want to live their lives. And they had enough respect for me. And to be honest, I was over in one corner in Wembley, and I was absolutely buzzing, not because of the fact that obviously because we won, but at the same time they had the decency to have actually thought of that.
So wonderful to hear.
Sorry, Tez. They're really, really beautiful little insights of actually what it's like to work on the inside of a football club. I wish media outlets could actually pick up more of those kind of good stories and how well some people are treated in football clubs, because they really do sometimes get a really bad name, certainly in the media, because of what's going on with online hate, with racism and stuff like that. So that's a really nice story that I really also hope gets out there.
Definitely. If I may take the opportunity just to again shamelessly plug my local football team, which is Altrincham, who are currently plying their trade in the National League. But Altrincham have given me many reasons to be proud of them over the last couple of years. They made headlines a couple of years ago for wearing a one-off rainbow shirt for the LGBT community. But actually, they during a stream of one of their games a couple of weeks ago, they actually did a webinar that they broadcast during the half-time break of that game. It was a dreadful game, so it was actually the highlight of the entire stream, quite frankly. And it was an interview with their two Muslim players that they have on the team, a gentleman called Yusufu Cisse, and also Yuan Zuma, who's the brother of Chelsea's Kurt. And the club have actually been working with the Ramadan project, who've been delivering packages to those players before game days. And I know that's their packages that go out to Muslim players across the football pyramid, including to Kurt himself, actually. So it was just wonderful to see that football clubs at all levels of the pyramid are getting involved in these initiatives and working with their local communities. I think that's a brilliant thing to see.
I think it is. Look, team sports is very much about everybody working together. And I remember one manager telling me, I think it might have been Sam Allardyce actually, and so I remember when he was up in Newcastle, he was very much about making sure that all his players were well looked after, and regardless of their faith and stuff. And so, like at Liverpool again, Brendan Rodgers, he had a multi-faith prayer room at the training ground at Melwood, so that any player, regardless of which faith that they were at, if they wanted a room where they wanted to go and have a quiet moment for themselves or pray, they were able to do that. Again, I think it was Sam Allardyce who said that, look, if you look after your workforce, then they will look after you. And it's not just about the money. At the end of the day, it's about being respected. It's about being, accepted. And at the end of the day, I know what comes first is my work. So as long as I'm doing my work to the highest level possible, then I'm going to be accepted, and that's what should matter. And it is, as I say, look, I other people may have different experiences, but all the experiences that I've had so far in football have only been positive.
So there's been so many things that we discussed with Josh and Isaac that have just given us so much more reason to be optimistic about the game going forward at a time when, of course, and Josh, sort of touched upon this. The stuff that is reported is generally sort of the negative aspects of the way the game is going, and I kind of just wanted to come back onto that sort of briefly, if you don't mind. The European Super League. Do you have any particular thoughts on the? I know Mr. Parrish has obviously had some things to say about that, but what are your own views on that, and VAR for that matter?
Look, in terms of, if you look at the European Super League, that was obviously a decision that was made higher up by business people, with the thought that they were going to be able to create more business for themselves. But what they failed to actually understand was what football actually means to the common fan, and the fact that what makes football so great, and I think across most sports, but more in particular football, that it, again, doesn't matter what your background is, how much money that you've got, when it comes to match day, you're all together as one, supporting that particular team. And I think the reason why it was striking such a chord with a lot of people, and why there was such hostility towards the idea, was that many people felt that opportunity of being able to be as one was being taken away from them. And I think that was a reason why so many people said, look, enough is enough. yes, we understand that, this may actually. So if you look at, a lot of the fans from those clubs, they were so against it. So even though they were the clubs that are most likely to benefit, it was okay. Well, we understand that there's money to be made, and that may help our 6 clubs, but this is bigger than that because it's actually going to affect us. That opportunity to be able to go and watch the game with, your own family, that's going to be made much harder, and it is inevitably then just going to end up being a game that is going to be watched with those that have got, a lot of money. So I think that's what struck. As I say, I was surprised how quickly it got shut down, because you'd have thought that there would have been a lot more thought process behind it. But look, as a fan of football, and from what you speak to the players, everybody is is in unison in the fact that it was a bad idea.
Yeah, I can only imagine that the crowds are already starting to gather outside Old Trafford as we speak. I think certainly Manchester United and Liverpool were seen as 2 of the key perpetrators. So I think I'd be very surprised if the fans weren't taking the opportunity today to make a stance. And I think you're absolutely right. I think generally the response from fans coming together as a community has been really positive. This is the game that we love, and we all clearly care about it very deeply, and the image that it portrays for every community. And I just want to echo what I said before. Really, there's some really really positive anecdotes there that Josh and I just never would have been aware of. Really, and particularly people like Mr. Allardyce, for example, is sometimes seen as very old school character in the game. When actually, I know he's been very up on his sports science, hasn't he? And actually, it's encouraging to hear that so many, the vast majority are are naturally very progressive. So we're just conscious of your time, Zaf. So we'll leave you to your Sunday shortly. But just wanted to sort of ask you what you'd be getting up to for the rest of the day, because ordinarily after the day after game day, I'm guessing it's your day off.
It is. So I've agreed to a few more interviews and being on a couple of panels. So again, to do with sport and performance, and a couple of to do with Ramadan. And I packed them all in today because, as I say, we haven't got much in terms of a free calendar coming to the end of the season. But then hopefully I should be finished by about 4:30, and then time to spend some time with the family and help my children with their revision.
Should I go to be watching United Liverpool then?
I don't think I'll be able to. I think I'd be sleeping outside if I said I also wanted to come back home and also watch the football as well.
Good stuff. And I must ask you, who's your own personal allegiance?
It always has been Liverpool, so it's never been. I've never hidden that. So even when I was at Spurs and at Crystal Palace, everybody knows I'm a Liverpool fan. But at the end of the day, my priority is with Crystal Palace. They put food on the table, so they're my number 1 team at present.
Well, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Best of luck to yourself and also Crystal Palace for the remainder of the season. It's been lovely to speak to you, Zaf.
Thank you very
much for your time.
Thanks.